welcoming a very special guest to the front page. He is known to many of you. He's an award-winning author, international entrepreneur, a chemist, an ordained minister, and a TV producer. And he's also an African-American civil rights leader and icon. He's president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers, based in Washington, D.C., and co-founder of Do Good and the Hip Hop Summit Action Network, based in New York. I am talking about Dr. Benjamin.
Good morning, Dominique. How are you?
I'm blessed. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm in Washington, D.C. this morning. Greetings to everybody there in California.
So you're not up quite as early as you could be if you were out here in L.A. It's great to have you on. So much going on in this country and locally here in California. Of course, we've got to start with the big picture. How concerned are you about November?
Well, I think that I agree with Congressman Clyburn. He said that the 2020 election is going to be the most consequential election in American history. I agree with that, and particularly for African Americans, people of color, all Americans, no matter what your race. I think everybody should vote, and all these attempts to suppress the vote in many of our communities, we have to be concerned about that. And I think that there are attempts to even I've seen on some social media now, there are a lot of people who are trying to discourage people from voting. So our role in the civil rights movement is to make sure, and our role in the African American press, we're trying to get the word out, is to make sure that everybody votes, vote properly, and vote energetically. In those states where you can vote early, we're encouraging people to vote early because a lot of the mail-in ballots, because of the volume of mail-in, it's going to be very slow. So it's going to be a consequential election, Dominic. But I think a democracy is a true democracy, and everybody gets a chance to participate. And I would say just not a chance, but a responsibility to participate. Civic participation is a responsibility for all the people who are eligible to vote should be voting.
Yeah, we always hear the same arguments. People died, people fought for your right to vote. And I think sometimes it goes in one ear and out the other. But for me,
I think
go ahead, yeah.
The reason why some people trivialize when you hear people say that is because they don't know the depth of that statement. It wasn't just a few people died, a few people went to jail. Dominique, a lot of people died. A lot of people shed their blood. A lot of people went to jail. A lot of people were lynched. A lot of people were had their whole family, their whole lives turned around because of the struggle to get the right to vote. And keep in mind, we did not get the Voting Rights Act, Dominique, until 1965. So prior to 1965, it wasn't even a federal law to ensure that everybody could vote without racial discrimination, without harassment, without voter suppression. And then a few years ago, the Supreme Court took out the enforcement measures of the Voting Rights Act. Now we have pending Congress. I'm so glad that Congressman Karen Bass, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and many others from California and the Congressional Caucus led the effort to get the Congress to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2020. It's passed the House, but the Senate, Ms. McConnell, refuses to bring it up for vote in the Senate. So I don't want people to take this matter lightly about the sacrifices and the hardships that people made and continue to have just to get the right to vote. And a lot of times, particularly our young millennials, we need to have a deeper understanding of American history. The reason why systemic racism is still so prevalent in America, Dominique, today in 2020 is because we're not as conscious as Americans of our history as we should be. That's a big problem. And if you don't know the history, you tend to allow the history to repeat itself.
Okay, since you brought it up, I got to ask you, give your definition of systemic racism. I feel like people are throwing around these terms, change the narrative, just systemic racism, and a lot of people don't even know what it means.
Well, first of all, systemic, let's deal with the word systemic first before we get to racism. When something is systemic, is institutionalized, is in the system. Let's take healthcare. Healthcare is a system. In the healthcare system right now, particularly people of color have disparities in terms of healthcare. A lot of people don't have insurance, not because they can't afford insurance, they can't. They're discriminated against and can't get it. And then some people can't afford it because of poverty. So there's a systemic discrimination in the healthcare system. This is what we mean by systemic. Now, racism. Racism is more than racial prejudice. Racism is racial prejudice plus the power to implement your prejudice to keep people down based on their race, based on their skin color, or based on their circumstances. And if you put the two together, systemic racism, that's a powerful institutionalization, systematic exclusion of people that impacts their quality of life based on their skin color or their race. That's what systemic racism is.
That's an important distinction because I was listening to some people last night and they always pivot to, well, some of my best friends are black, or, there are some bad cops.
They're confusing racism with prejudice. But if somebody has the power based on their racial prejudice to deny people access to anything that can impact or improve their quality of life, then that is the difference between racism and prejudice. Prejudice alone is not racism. Prejudice, I feel bad about it. I don't like a person because maybe I don't like their background. I don't like the fact that they speak a certain language. I don't like the fact that they dress different. I don't like
right. That's like bigotry, right?
That's right. But if I take the fact that I have racial prejudice and then use the power that I have, the economic power, the political power, the structural power. If I'm a police officer, I have power. I have a badge. I have a weapon that I can use under the law, under the color of law. But if I take my power as a police officer under the color of law and use my prejudice under the color of law, then that is systemic racism. And that's why disproportionately the African Americans today, as well as Latinas, are impacted by police brutality. People say, well, why does this happen? It's because it is an example of systemic racism.
Yeah, I think it's important because people, the bad apples theory, it sort of invalidates the whole concept that you can have racism baked in the cake in schools, in banking institutions, in police departments. So even if you went in there with, nothing but love in your heart, you could still end up executing a system that continues to oppress, for lack of a better word.
I'm glad you said that, Dominique. Look, and the words that we use are very, very important. James Baldwin's a close friend of mine, and he's passed on, but he's a great writer. And he and I used to talk about all the time the power of words. But the words get a power, particularly if you understand the power of words. And the thing is, I think people, a system is made up of people. Keep in mind, the court system is made up of people. The healthcare system is made up of people. Police department is made up of people. So when Attorney General Barr yesterday said, blacks are disproportionately imposed, but it had nothing to do with racism. He was so quick to be conclusive, to be dismissive of the whole history of racial injustice. Do you know, Dominic, during slavery, there were people in religious circles and high places that justified slavery, saying, this is, we take these ignorant people from Africa, yes, they're enslaved, but we're helping them. We're giving them a better life by chaining them, by slaving them, by forcing them to work without a salary. That was the notion.
Yeah. I mean, civilizing, right? It's really what it is.
Civilizing and trivializing.
And trivializing. And I wonder, I heard someone talking yesterday saying they believe that that President Trump believes the things that he's saying. And I'm talking about, and I'm listening to what you're saying about William Barr. And you wonder, do they believe this, or are they just simply lying to maintain their power? Because how can you look at the data? How can you look at people that work 12 generations? You think they're just lying?
Right. Yeah, I think they're lying. People lie to maintain their power. People lie to enjoy their privileged positions. People lie to justify wrongdoing. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people in high places today in America that basically lie to keep their positions of privilege.
Well, as a younger guy, you worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. You were an assistant to him. He was an inspiration to you. And that's quite a track record of being in the civil rights movement. How do you see today's movement, today's, anti-racist movement, Black Lives Matter, through that lens?
Sure. Well, that's a great question. Thank you so much. Yes, I tell people I grew up in the movement. I wasn't just in the movement. The movement grew in the 1960s, so did Benjamin Chavis. I was so thankful I had parents. My mother and father allowed me to work for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when I was 14. My parents permitted me to get my NAACP membership card when I was 12. So the only regret I have, I should have joined the movement when I was 6. That's the good.
You've lost 6 whole years.
Exactly. It took me to 12 years old to start becoming, a man-child, in the movement. But I'm very grateful. So, yes, to answer your question, the civil rights movement is still alive today. It evolves. I was very much, I was one of the few civil rights leaders that started advocating for hip-hop. Because when hip-hop first started in the 1980s, a lot of people thought this was antithetical to the movement. But every generation has its nuances. And so when I see and witness, and I have to join some of the Black Lives Matter marches myself, I'm so pleased to see how that the movement is still alive. It may be characterized differently. It may be used different. We said we shall overcome. Now they're saying Black Lives Matter. But undergirding we shall overcome and Black Lives Matter today is the same thrust for freedom, justice, and equality. And to make sure that the movement is diverse, the movement is inclusive. And I think I would note, do you have many more white people today carrying Black Lives Matter signs than we had back in the 60s carrying we shall overcome signs? So has the movement progressed? Absolutely. And I think that we have to keep pushing it. I know that there are attempts in Washington to demonize the term Black Lives Matter, but I think that it will survive that demonization. I'm very supported, and I'm encouraged by young people, by millennials and others, intergenerational. The Black Lives Matter movement is intergenerational, Dominique. And is multiracial, is multicultural. And I think that's one of the strengths of the Black Lives Matter movement, that is not narrow, that is very broad.
Yeah, it's a lot of great points. 5:13 in the morning, we're talking with Dr. Ben Chavis. Really, an honor to have you on. And when we get back, I want to talk about, AB 5 here in the state of California and why the black press may be under attack right now. 520 KJLH.
We're glad to talk to you. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, and you can call us 520 KJLH 520-5554. Add your area code on the front. This is a great moment. You can talk to Dr. Chavis yourself if you have a question or quick comment. It's the front page. We are broadcasting live from the 1-800 The Law 2 studio, Radio Free 102.3 KJLH.